Hello, and welcome to Tech Connects, Dice's podcast where we dig into the topics on tech hiring, recruiting, and careers that matter to you. I'm your host, Nick Kolakowski, and I'm talking to great guests every month about the current state of the tech careers world, including the tech job market, the hottest tech skills, what companies are doing to attract and retain tech professionals in a historically tight market, and much more. Our guest today is Paul DeBettignies. He's a tech recruiting veteran with over 20 years of experience, and he's built teams for startups and huge companies alike, as well as crafted recruiting strategies for Fortune 500 clients. He's a prolific blogger, author of the long-running Minnesota Headhunter blog, and a frequent speaker at local and national events, offering expertise on recruiting, HR, careers, and social media. In other words, he's a great person to talk with about the current state of tech hiring as we enter the new year, so let's listen in. Thank you for being on this. I mean, I know that you're busy. I know that,
This is awesome. This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. And the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about, since as a recruiting expert, is, obviously we're heading in towards the end of the year. It's closer than a lot of people think. I feel like every time I talk to people, they suddenly realize that we're only 6 weeks out from the end of the year, and they start to panic because I think everyone sort of assumes intuitively, like, oh, I've got months, and they don't quite put it together until
I did a post at the beginning of October that said, you think you have this many weeks left. Like you think you have 13, you really have 9.5. And I walked it back, right? Because with the Christmas and New Year holiday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so it really does change it should be changing. I just think that most folks, like you were saying, are reactive. We don't think about it until it's too late. And then it's too late. And we're like, oh, crap.
No, it's definitely true. And so, but the thing is that, so you have all these recruiters and hiring managers and so on, and they're thinking about 2025, and hopefully they're already kind of mature in that thinking, but the pipeline has to be filled. And the pipeline especially has to be filled with, for many companies, like a wide variety of tech professionals, whether they're software engineers or if they've got a huge budget, AI and so on. And so, from your perspective, at least, and given the competition out there, how should companies kind of be, especially if they're playing catch up right now? How should companies be thinking about getting that pipeline ready for 2025? Like, what do they need to be aware of? What do they need to be frightened of? Maybe what do you see as sort of the status for people? What can they do about it?
I don't want to be an alarmist, but if you're starting to think about it now, it's a little late.
Oh yeah.
And if you haven't started it, and if I've now freaked you out, it's not too late. But I would say, for me, you're behind the curve. Again, the holidays, in December being in the middle of the week, but, Thursday and Friday post-Christmas, Thursday and Friday post-New Year's, for all those folks that you have not been able to get a hold of, who've been so busy and the holidays, this, that, and the other thing, and they've been traveling and Q4, all of the stuff. At some point in time, they're going to be like, I'm tired of dealing with my family. I would love to have that conversation with someone in the industry. I would love to start talking about 2025. And by the way, I have 3 calls this Friday for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. I have 3 calls that have been on the books for 3 weeks with folks who said, like, I can't talk to you until then. And I'm like, as long as we do it after the Gopher Badger football game, which is an 11 a.m. Central Time start, I'm good after like 2:30. I might not be in a good mood, but you've got my attention. And I think that, like, this is what we should be doing. There's a lot of angst in the industry right now. And so whether we are recruiting now, still for 2024, if we're pipeline building for 2025, if we've got candidates who need some one-on-one human therapy, these are still optimal times to get these phone calls done, because now it's more like a coffee shop talk than an interview or an interrogation or like all of the heaviness. Like, let's just chat.
I'm envisioning somebody who's doing like the inevitable pile of dishes after Thanksgiving dinner and scrubbing and like that kind of like mindless grind and thinking like, oh, it'd actually be a pretty good time to like pop in my AirPods and talk with somebody about like what my future is going to look like as I'm desperately trying to get like this grease off this pan. That it would be kind of an ideal time to call somebody.
I am a do the opposite of what everybody else does kind of person, right? I'm 25 plus years in. I think it served me fairly well. December is always my busiest month, whether I'm working with a client or whether I'm doing search firm work, because it is the time when people get reflective. I don't know about you, but I'm very reflective on 2024. And well, heck, since January 7th of 2020, I'm very reflective over the last 4 years. But it is a good time to be thinking. I love it when people take the time off.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm attentive to my family and friends and stuff, but it is also the time when we can actually have these conversations with folks,
Mhm.
and they can be more specific and meaningful than put 35 minutes on my Calendly because that's all we have to do a quick interview.
Yeah.
This is the time where you get to talk about other things too.
Hmm. Do you think, I mean, December being that super busy period, do you think that that's a reflection of companies, like the budget gets approved in November and then companies are sort of rushing in? Do you think it's because they've waited to the last minute? I mean, that's interesting that you say that that's a huge, insane period for you.
And so, what is the first full Monday this year is January 6th.
Hmm.
I already have clients who we've already posted jobs saying Q1 2025 software developer remote. They're already out there.
Hmm.
And the idea is that, yes, we can have these conversations now versus waiting until January 6th and then going right from stop to fast to build these pipelines up ahead of time. And there's still going to be hiring to be done yet for this current quarter or this current year.
Yeah.
For those companies who have like a use it or lose it type mentality, there is still time
Hmm.
to get folks going. And the other part is that even if you're doing your phone screens now for 2025 budget, but you've already got your recruiter screen knocked out, and maybe you've already had a tech screen done by the manager,
Hmm.
you are now 2 weeks ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And so just for speed to get ahead of everybody else is the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. It also makes me think that for so much of the year, it just seemed like there was, I'm not sure what the proper term is, uncertainty, kind of, like there's been industry turbulence and everything else. And now that we're at the end of the year, a lot of companies have probably kind of firmed up their, you would hope at least that the companies have firmed up their thinking strategically and like, finally, after 11 months of chaos and waffling and whatnot, this is what we need and we're going to do it. Like, we're not actually going to spend all of our money on AI people. We're just going to spend it all on software developers or something like that they have kind of a better idea.
If you think about it, so I'm here in Minneapolis. I primarily do most of my work in the Midwest, the Bay Area,
Mhm.
and then remote roles.
Yeah.
And so, so I have a very Midwest mentality, which is things tend to happen on the coasts first. Anything,
Mhm. Mhm.
music, fashion, food, the economy.
Mhm.
And so, like when big tech West Coast was doing their layoffs, we didn't actually feel it when that was happening. Mid 22,
Mhm. Mhm.
early 22. It didn't hit here till till January of 23. It's that much of a lag.
Yeah.
And so then for us too, right? Like I kind of need big tech West Coast, East Coast AI hiring to amp up even more.
Mhm.
So the wave gets to the Midwest a little bit faster than it is. So we are still a bit stagnant though.
Huh.
I noticed Q1 this year. I was saying to my friends, like it feels slower here than everywhere else. Like my friends on the coast or my friends down in Austin, like there's something about the Midwest, and everybody was telling me I was wrong. But GDP numbers came out at the end of June, the final ones for Q1 by state, and all of the Midwest was a negative number.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so when September numbers came out for end of Q2, everybody was in the twos and the threes, and we were at like 1.3, which is
Mhm.
great that we're positive, but we're still behind the curve. But that's
That
how
makes
it goes,
sense.
right? In the Midwest, we have lower highs, higher lows.
Mhm.
We don't have the freak out. We don't have all of the funding. We're very pragmatic. We actually build things that people consume and use in the
True.
Midwest.
Yeah. No.
A
True. Very true.
little sarcastic, but generally true.
No, it's true.
Um,
Yeah.
and so most of our startups here, our technology companies, are building something that people use versus the next algorithm trying to get acquired by Google,
Mhm.
right? Which means though that we are usually a lagging indicator on these things.
That
And
makes
so for
perfect
here, you
sense.
still have some folks thinking, what is our budget for 2025 and what are we going to do? Where my friends on the coast have generally had it figured out for 3 to 6 weeks.
Mhm. No, that makes total sense actually, because I have two friends, one of whom lives in Nebraska and the other one lives in Kansas, and they both work for large software companies, and they're sort of going through right now. Not them personally, thankfully, but their companies respectively are going through that same layoff cycle that hit the coast earlier. So I mean that's an example or two examples of what you were just saying. That's really, I hadn't thought about, kind of, because I
Yeah.
think there's a temptation to think about everything is sort of holistic and happening at once across the country. But yeah, you have regional
Mm-hmm.
trickle down.
It's like I've been nerdy about, the first week of every month is the employment numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You get your JOLTS numbers of who's been laid off, who's turning over, who's opted out. You get the Thursday, Friday labor numbers. And so it's very, I think a lot, the mistake that some people have if they are recruiting across the U.S. is they look at the overarching numbers, which tend to be weighted by the coasts.
Mm-hmm.
But what is going on in the Bay Area is not going on in Chicago, is not going on in Austin. It may not be going on in Nashville compared to what's going on in New York.
Yeah.
And
so
sense. There is this to say to our peers, like there are regions right now that are doing well and the regions are doing less well. And it's never the same, right? AI on the West Coast is not AI in Nashville. And so hiring may be different. The time to hire may be different. The amount of candidates available may be different. Well, is different.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. It's interesting, the whole, I don't want to plunge too deeply into the AI thing, but I was talking, it's come up again and again. I was talking to the president of O'Reilly and I was talking to the CIO of TIA, and there's even among companies they're exceptionally well monetized. What they've all been telling me is that there's a temptation among companies that, you need to do like an AI build out. You need to build customized AI, which requires hiring people who are versed in machine learning and everything like that. But now it seems you almost have this counterpull where executives are saying there's no need to hire all of these people. What you can, because most of what you're going to be doing is prompt engineering. Your software developers are going to be using GitHub Copilot or whatever it is to generate code. You don't need all this infrastructure and everything. You just need an account with Google or OpenAI or whatever, and then you need to train people on it and then retain the people, hopefully, who have learned enough that they're not tempted to go somewhere else with their newfound AI skills. Is that something you're seeing where, like, for tech jobs, like there's this pop-up where, they want more tech professionals, no matter who they are, to have AI skills? Are companies like training towards it and saying, now we're going to upskill you and hopefully you stay around? Like, what's the state of play there?
I'm going to go back one step first, which is,
okay. Boom.
I keep hoping that there are adults in the rooms having these conversations versus the reactive adolescents that were doing this in 2021.
Yes, definitely.
That we are actually being thoughtful and planful, right? We were in that era. It was grow at all costs, right? 22 and 23 became, and 24 became be profitable at all cost. Cost in both of these scenarios is humans and people, and they have families and kids and parents to take care of, and tuition and rent and mortgages. And I appreciate that industry needs to make money and do. I get all of that, but let's also just for a moment just stop and be humans.
Yeah.
And remind ourselves that, it's like when a big West Coast tech company in 2021 had 5,000 people in talent acquisition. In March of 23, they were down to 800. 5,000 might have been too many and 800 might have been too few. Like, where are the adults? So I'm hoping in the scenario you're giving me that there are actually adults in the room who are actually being planful about these things. I get a lot of the questions here in Minneapolis, and sort of what I call the central third, the central quarter between who are saying, software developers are saying, Paul, like, what should I be doing? What do I need to be learning? And what do I need to, the answer is yes. The answer is if you are going to wait, this wave's going to smack you really hard. And it's not that you won't survive it, but you're going to have physical scars off this one.
Yeah.
This will set you back. And I appreciate that a lot of this is still very new. So it's hard for TA or VP of people or CTO to be able to predict how many people do we really need. I'm hoping that we're not going to get into the arms race again if we need to go hire 100 people so that our competitor doesn't hire 20 of them.
Yeah, which was a problem before, obviously, with
and
last
so
couple of years.
What happens is the industry, right, is we're doing a whole lot of short-term thinking on everything. And I get that. We're reactive, right? Because we have now been taught, I would suggest, by industry, and I mean all companies, that shareholders and investors matter more than everybody else. And what they want matters more than anybody else. So if they want a thing, then you got to go do a thing to make them happy, or however it is. But don't let shareholders and investors say you need to go build out an AI program with 300 people when you can do it with 50.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, this is me containing a long, long rant that could probably go till Thanksgiving. So there's that. I want to give you another bit of part of an answer too, and I know I'm rambling a bit, which is this, is that most companies, their tech debt is a freaking mountain now. So many companies have not done anything in 6 months to 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We have been in the mud, stuck. Again, we're making shareholders and investors happy. We're not investing into things. Like the amount of backlog of stuff itself,
it's a mountain.
It's bonkers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a scenario that, and so let's note it that it's Monday, November 25th.
Okay.
And I've been talking about this with friends for the last year. Let me be clear. I did not predict the Great Resignation of 2021. I did not. In August of 2020, though, I was saying to friends that something felt weird in the employment market, particularly in tech, particularly in Minneapolis, because that's where all my time was being spent. Every ingredient that went into the Great Resignation of 2021 still exists today, except it's muted because we're scared.
Yeah.
If not more profound now, because you have mandatory 5-day a week, or at least return to office, or we're at least not hiring or promoting anybody who's remote anymore.
Yeah.
When we get to the other side of whatever this economy is, and when it filters out and it figures itself out, I'm not saying we're going to have a Great Resignation 2.0, but I am calling it a sequel. And like most sequels, other than I think Top Gun 2 is better than Top Gun 1.
I would say that. Yeah, I'd agree. Definitely. Yeah.
Both sequels are never as good as the first one. But even if this next thing that I'm talking about is only 20 or 30% of what that first one was, most of these companies are so grossly unprepared for this because we haven't been worrying about retention because we've gone back to the office hoping people would leave. Oh, by the way, they will.
The gentleman's layoff, as they call it. Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
And when your employer brand's getting tarnished in the process, and when you're treating people like crap on their way out the door. Again, I would suggest that I'm waiting for some of the adults to show up in the room and to say to folks, our being reactionary isn't going to serve us in the long run again.
When would this happen? I mean, theoretically, when do you see it's hard to predict the future. We don't have crystal balls, but I mean, for 2.0, like the Godfather 2 of the Great Resignations to happen. Well, I mean, obviously Godfather 2 is not 30% of Godfather 1, but anyway, that aside, when do you think, I mean, theoretically, when would we start seeing this happen? Is this like a 6-month out thing? Is this like a 1.5 year out thing? I mean, how do you think about it in your mind, at least?
So let me start with, again, that I said this a year ago to friends.
True.
And I keep saying, whenever we get past whatever this is, here's likely what's going to happen. Now, I've got a friend of mine who I've known for a number of years who works at the Minneapolis Fed. He's a labor person. And he sent me a note a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, so like, when's your thing going to happen? I go, when is your recession going to happen?
True.
Like, you've been telling me a recession for 2 years. And whether we've had a rolling one, or getting away from the politics of the economy of things. You've been telling me we're going to have a recession. So you're already knocking me for like 9 months for something that you haven't produced in 2 years. So first of all, back off.
Yeah.
Second of all, I think a lot of this is going to depend on what happens in DC over the coming months.
True.
Are we going, if indeed, again, I want to be a little soft and careful about this, but if indeed we're going to call all federal workers back in, and if the intent is for some of them to leave because they don't want to, what will that do to the broader employment market? What happens to the technology people who are so used to working remote because they can't? What happens to the employment market of Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC, that whole corner, right? Like, what happens? I keep saying to everybody in Minneapolis, whatever's going on right now for you for the last 6 months is the next 6 months. If you've been in demand, you're going to be in demand. If you're having a hard time finding a role, you're going to have a hard time finding a role. And this is broad. I'm painting a really big brush, right? We have a good startup tech community, but we have a bunch of Fortune 500 companies here. But I'm guessing, though, whatever has been will be for the next 6 months.
Okay.
But just by natural, we can't, at some point, because now we're going to be 3 years into a flat economy.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if we actually look at the numbers, if GDP is between 2 and 3, and if the unemployment rate, which we get into some fuzzy numbers here, but if any time in the U.S. history, if we had GDP between 2 and 3 and unemployment of 4.5 or less, we would be celebrating this.
As opposed to now, yeah, but that's where the numbers are, and people are still pessimistic as heck. So,
someone used the word a while ago. I didn't see it. It was an article I read because I kept saying that we've been in a recession of momentum and emotion. Someone called it a vibe session.
That's a good way to put it. I love the idea of like a recession of momentum.
That is the word, vibe session, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It feels one thing, but it actually might be a little bit of a something else given our personal circumstances and our roles in our companies.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the interesting thing, well, not interesting. I mean, to your point about how it's going to pan out, I mean, taking the geographical look at it for just a second, the Maryland, Virginia, DC, like every time I look, because I'm also looking at those monthly reports when they kick out on the 5th or whatever, that whole area has been a powerhouse thanks to like all the feds, all the Fed contractors, et cetera, all like Amazon and everybody hiring for all their pipelines going through Northern Virginia. If that goes topsy-turvy, if that gets put in the wash cycle and goes like around and around and around a little bit too much, that's going to be really, it's going to fall off. They struggled to the top of all these lists over the past 5 to 10 years in terms of like tech job postings and everything. It's going to come out. That's yikes. I hadn't thought about that sort of play out.
And I don't mean to have this grin on my face. It's a very scared, apprehensive, because again, we are going to be talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. No,
and what is the ripple effect of this?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't know. I don't have a when. I don't know when this thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we could be living in a muddy water for 2 or 3 more years if we could, right? For all of this to settle. Like I'm a water guy. I like to be in boats, right? I think you're going through that shallow part of the lake, right? And all the sediment's getting kicked up, and it takes a while for it to settle back down again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long it takes, but it does settle back down. It always does.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, the other thing I'm wondering too, from the recruiter perspective, so, because this is all of a system, and at the same time, recruiters are also dealing with, at least based on my conversations with them, pressure to like kind of automate more of the hiring process and do more with smaller teams and everything else. So I imagine that what we're looking at over the next sort of time frame is also kind of really interesting and turbulent for recruiters themselves. I mean, like, do you shrink teams? Do you try to automate more? How do you preserve that human touch amidst that? I mean, how do you think that's going to play out on the recruiting side of the equation?
So we're already seeing it. We have been for 6 to 9 months, right? We are coming up, right? Are we not at the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT as we know it
We are,
today?
Exactly. Almost to the day, I think.
Right? It would have been that Thanksgiving week or the end of November of 23 or 22, sorry.
Yeah.
We're here. It's a 2-year anniversary. I still have friends, peers who are super talented, sourcers, recruiters, people operations folks who still haven't even played with the tool yet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which for them scares the heck out of me.
Yeah, definitely. It would. Yeah.
I think what's going to happen, and again, this gets to a bit of that prediction I made, but like if I've got a bot and the candidate's got a bot, our bots talk to each other and bots do bot things, that sooner or later, right, we still have to have 2 humans talk to each other. Now, can we automate some of the beginning stuff? I kind of hope so. But I will also say that I haven't seen many of the AI tools who still are doing this better than most humans can when it comes to resumes, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I create a job description from a hiring manager, and that's not always a very accurate document, and I plug that in, and now we've got a candidate who's seeing this and using an LLM to create a resume and a cover letter, if that's what they choose to do, to match my job description. So far we have a semi not current job description with a semi false resume.
Right. Yeah.
And now our bots talk to each other. Okay, great. Can I imagine a number of years down the road? See, right here's what I know. I know that when I've got candidates interviewing right now, or those who've got job offers coming up in the next couple of weeks, I know all of the personal stuff about them. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that I know as in like I'm going to use. I know what they're looking for, what they want, what they're scared of, what their career goal is. I'm assuming the AI is a ways away from being able to get that. So I do suggest that what's likely going to happen is that we're going to have shiny object in the HR tech industry. I think we are having shiny object in the HR tech industry, where most companies are trying not to hire HR and recruiter folks until they know what the AI can do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the process, we're going to have a bunch of recruiter and HR folks leave the industry. So a lot of historical perspective will be gone. If we get to that part where we have a great resignation 2.0, so now you're going to be grossly understaffed on your recruiting and HR side.
Oh, God.
So let's say you had 10 corporate recruiters. Again, now, remember, I'm not talking about Fortune 500 companies. I'm talking about companies of 3,000 people or less, or 1,000 or less. But let's just round the numbers. You had 10 corporate recruiters. You went down to 2 because you're making shareholders and investors happy.
Of course, yeah.
You got the new tools. So what's the number do you really need? It might be 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
And when was the last time anybody actually audited their recruiting process and strategy?
They never do in a lot of cases. They just sort of expect it to operate as it operates.
We again react with all of these things with adults not in the room, not actually looking at data. So we audit security systems, we audit financial systems. So now the thing that fuels all of that, which is us finding people.
Yeah.
But we don't even know where we are. I appreciate that I have a pretty sarcastic tone with you today.
No, it's great.
This is where I've been for the last year. And so at some point, I keep thinking that if we're going to wash out a bunch of tech people, like the East Coast story that we were saying, if we're going to wash out a bunch of recruiter and HR folks, don't we need the AI tools to actually step in and take care of the numbers we no longer even have?
Yeah, and that's not happening when all these tools are hallucinating left and right, and they just have no, I mean, as smooth as ChatGPT has gone in the past 2 years, and it has gone very smooth when you type whatever prompt engineering you're doing, it can fake like it understands context, but it can't. And I feel like with a lot of recruiting, it's all context and it's all that nuance of understanding like what the company needs. Does this individual fit with the culture, which is not really something that AI can grasp easily.
And it's also a reminder that we are using predictive language for what the next word should be. So I can have my job description, I can have my candidate notes, and I can have the candidate resume.
Yeah.
And I can say to ChatGPT, whatever tool, and say, hey, so give me a succinct one paragraph of the viability of this candidate for this role. Is missing so many inputs to this.
Yes.
And it's taking 3 documents. Again, let's stipulate that the job description might not be awesome and the resume may not be accurate. And we're making hiring decisions based on this?
They are. That's the sad thing. A lot of companies are just in the interest of speed.
So here's something I hadn't thought of until just now. I really hadn't. So thank you for this conversation.
Okay.
By the way.
All right. Yeah. No, this is great. Yeah.
It's if we get to the part in a more normalized job economy, let's just call it normal.
Okay.
And we are now saying to our candidates who are AI machine learning folks, like let's take the super in demand folks. Are they going to want to talk to a chatbot?
No, because it's dehumanizing and they're going to feel devalued.
So I called this morning I had a request about some health insurance stuff. And what's the first thing I did after I hit 000 customer service representative?
Yeah, we all do that. Yeah.
So you're trying to recruit a bunch of like amazing AI folks, or it could be DevOps engineers with a heavy security. Like it could be any skill set. It doesn't have to be just AI and machine learning folks. How many of them are going to want to actually talk about benefits and salary in a monotone voice with a thing that's talking just like this, who doesn't have voice inflection and doesn't really No.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, and also a lot of software developers, especially if another company that wants their services can have a real live human on the line with them, they're going to hang up on the Autobot in favor of the human.
We do need automation in this stuff. And so this is why I say to folks and my peers, is that if we went from 10 to 2, we're probably going to get back to 4 or 5 corporate recruiters. That means 5 are gone.
Yeah.
It does mean this, though. I'm not saying again, like most things, right? I think we tend to be living in a society right now where everything's right, wrong, win, lose.
Yeah.
Me versus them. I keep saying like the only unilateral thing in my world is that the Badgers suck, right? Go play the Badger again. Like it's on my mind, right?
Yeah. No, obviously. Yeah.
Other than that, there is no universal thing. I live in a very gray, blurry world, and I have for a really long time. And it seems to me that it's almost always in the middle on almost everything. My friends will just say to me, the only thing in the middle of the road is like the dashed line and the dead squirrels. That's where I'm hanging out. Okay.
But you know what? I mean, that gives you perspective on what's happening in both lanes in a certain way, or allows you to like kind of absorb the new. I'm trying to drag this analogy up. I'm just saying that like the middle of the road,
I know you wanted to ask me questions, but I want to ask you one.
Okay.
What are people's moods? You're having these conversations with all of these folks in our industry. What's their tone? What's their feel? How do they seem?
I mean, I think people are veering rapidly between pessimism and anger. It's been a really long time since I've
Mm.
run into anybody who is optimistic. And when people sort of display flashes of optimism, they're displaying flashes of optimism around their personal setup. So, for example, if I'm talking to the just the other day, like the head recruiter for a more scientific based startup that's specializing in a technology that'll probably pay off in like 5 or 10 years. But she was very excited about the work life balance and the opportunity to work from home. That this particular recruiting position, and it's the same thing on the tech pro side. Like tech pros are often very excited about like their personal circumstance, or they got like a great job here and it's finally working out for them after they did 5 years in like the salt mines of whatever big tech company. But speaking from to use the cliche, like the 35,000 foot view or whatever, like everybody is pretty, there's a lack of momentum. To your point, there's a recession of momentum. There's a lot of pessimism. There's a lot of, people are a malaise. I mean, people are trying to kind of figure their way out of it. It's not, yeah. So, I mean, that's how it seems. It seems like it's the same gray that you were just describing seems to be general for a lot of folks out there.
I think that we need to remind ourselves also then whether we are job seekers, whether we're employed or not, and whether we're recruiting and HR folks or we're hiring managers, that how should I phrase this? Well, the way I do phrase it is this: it's not a political thing, but the politics of the last 10 years have been a lot.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
We've got how everyone feels about the COVID-19 year and the years since.
Yeah.
I'm in the town where George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
Like, a lot's happened.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that a lot of people, if not most people, feel a little more heavy than they used to.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So when it comes to our job search, our recruiting, giving offers, onboarding, retention, candidate and employer experience, can't we just give each other a break? Like,
you'd hope so, yeah.
Like, can we just stop or slow down or release some of that air in the balloon, release some of the pressure? Because, okay, I haven't swore yet, but we're going to do no. This shit's gotten hard.
Yeah, for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It's not just like one monolithic type of like difficult. It's like, it seems like on many levels for many people, it's just gotten.
And so we're worrying about things at home, and we're worrying about things at work, and we're worrying about things in the world. And so it doesn't matter what side you're on. You're worrying about stuff, and you're thinking about the economy, and you're like, my goodness. So I don't mean to be heavy about it, but it's the reminder for people to be like, whatever you're thinking and feeling, just assume that everyone else is too. And if we're being honest about it, can we just bring it down a notch?
Yeah, I think everybody would be well served just to as we go into 2025 to loop it to the beginning to like just take that breath and take that time and try to like ease out a little bit. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But yeah, a lot of people are really, I mean, podcasts, articles I write, et cetera. It seems that that's sort of a generalized thing. And you're right. I mean, a lot of people are also just tense. I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty over what the industry is going to look like, what the economy is going to look like. And I think that people have to give themselves a little bit of grace. So.
And then the people that we're interviewing, right? Like I've had candidates, I'll give you a quick version of the story. Marketing friend of mine here in Minneapolis, director, getting interviewed by a CMO friend of mine. They don't know that I know each other. And it was weird how I found out. Candidate person is neurodivergent and said, hey, Paul, like I'm getting ready to do this interview, and I didn't know who it was with yet. He's like, do you think if I keep it down here that I can do my fidget spinner? I've been really antsy lately. Yeah. I don't like interviewing. I'm like, of course you should. I end up finding this out that it's with this person. And so the CMO says, yeah, I had that interview and it went really bad. The person could have seemed more interested. They were scattered. They were looking all around. You could tell they just didn't want to be there.
Oh, no.
So I say to my director friend, like, what happened? And I just said, like, hey, how did it go?
Yeah.
And he's like, that couldn't have been like the worst interview I've ever had. They couldn't seem more disinterested. You could hear noise in the background. You could tell it was impacting them. So I went back to my CMO friend and I said, were you at home? Was the construction still going on outside? Or was the dog barking? And he's like, yeah, why? And he goes, oh.
Yeah.
So his view was that this person wasn't interested. This person's got some neurodivergent things going on and hasn't interviewed in a long time when they're nervous and they're worried, right? This person thinks that they're amazing and is critiquing this person that actually did all of the things that they thought this person did. And this is that part, right? Like, I don't know, like we all just gotta like a little more grace,
Mm-hmm.
a little more kindness, maybe. And
Yeah.
yes, we need to move fast, and I get that. But let's not move so fast that we're treating people the way we wouldn't want to be treated ourselves.
Okay. I think that's a good rule to absorb, a good lesson to absorb. Well, that was a fascinating conversation. Here are some quick takeaways as you proceed on your own tech recruiting journey. First, don't procrastinate on hiring. Companies should start planning and preparing for their 2025 hiring needs now, rather than waiting until the last minute. Waiting too long can put you at a disadvantage and limit your options. Second, you can leverage a holiday season for productive conversations. A holiday season can be an unexpected opportunity for productive conversations with potential candidates. People may be more receptive to calls during this time, believe it or not. As they're taking time off, they're looking for distractions, they want to talk with somebody who's not family, so shoot your shot. Third, be mindful of regional differences in the job market. The job market can vary significantly by region, so it's important to consider regional factors when planning your hiring strategy. For example, the Midwest may be slower to recover from economic downturns compared to the coasts. Fourth, embrace AI as a tool, not as a replacement. AI can be a really valuable tool for recruiters and hiring managers, but it should not be seen as a replacement for human interaction. It's all about that human touch. It's important to strike a balance between automation and humanity, I guess for want of a better term, in order to ensure a positive candidate experience. There was a lot more in that discussion with Paul, of course, so give it another listen if you feel so inclined. Thank you for joining us, and remember, Dice is your best resource to find the tech talent you need to fill your open roles, and for tech pros, the best place to grow your tech career.